Hello, everyone, and welcome to another rendition of the Platform Book Club. I am here with the amazing Jennifer Lynn Alvarez, who is going to be talking all about Lies Like Wildfire, which I have. Both of us have a copy, but neither of us have the UK copy, which is also an absolutely gorgeous cover. I really, really love it. Yeah, today we are going to be chatting with an author. How exciting. You can put all of your questions in the chat, and I am monitoring the chat, so I will be able to pick them up, so don't worry about that. If you would like to ask questions in advance, then you can join the Discord. The link is in the description for future streams. So if you are here and you're like, what is this? What is happening? We basically read a book every single month for the book club. And at the end of the month, on the last Tuesday of every month, we have a Q&A with the author. So how it's going to work, if you are currently watching this because you have heard about this book and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, this first section is going to be for you because we are going to avoid spoilers. And then the second half, we will do spoiler warning, pause, wait till you've read the book and then come back, because we'll be talking all about the ending. And with a book like this, the ending is a big deal, right? Like it's the ending is the thing. With thrillers, you really like who done it, what was going on, what was the truth is really important. So very excited to get into that. So without further ado, I'm going to start with some questions. So we are going to start actually with a question from one of the readers. This is something that Kai asked on Discord, which is how/why/when did you get the idea for this book?
All right. Well, hi, everybody. It's great to be here. So that is a really great question. And it actually started, it didn't start as, it wasn't initially going to be a wildfire book. It was going to be, the initial idea was I wanted to write about 5 like best friends who make a horrible mistake right after they graduate high school. There's so much work that goes into those years in high school to get into college. You know, kids are like on varsity teams and taking a bunch of tests, and the main character, Hannah, has done all of that. And this was also when the varsity blues scandal was happening in the United States, with parents like bribing their kids into college, and that's how much pressure there is on a lot of kids to try to move on. Not all of the friends are going to college, but 3 of them are. And so I wanted to write about making a horrible, awful mistake right after that, during the summer that you finally get to relax, and then you make this mistake and all your dreams could go up in flames. So the idea came to me actually while I was walking my dog by a lake, and I started imagining kids having fun at the lake, celebrating the end of high school, and then something happens. And of course, my first thought was they murder somebody, like sort of accidentally murder somebody. But it's hard to accidentally murder a person, actually. I really tried, and I was like, no. And so anyway, but I went home and I just started writing. I thought, I'm just going to develop the characters and start to figure it out. And as I was writing, I just immediately, my fingers like started tingling, and I was like, they're going to start a wildfire. And I knew that accidentally starting a wildfire was a crime. So I knew that would put pressure on the kids. And so that's kind of where the idea originated. And as soon as I knew that they started a fire, I did some more research. And while I knew it was a crime, I didn't even realize how bad of a crime it is and how seriously it's prosecuted. So, and then also the punishments escalate as there's more damage done or if people are injured. So, and that's what happens. There's a lot of structural damage, there's deaths, and that ups everything to felony murder. So at that point, I knew the stakes would be super high. And I also kind of like because of my own experience with wildfire in Sonoma County, which is Northern California, I had been through all of this. I knew the trauma, the fear, that what a community goes through. I thought, if any of these fires that burn through our community year after year and destroyed homes and lives, that if a teenager, like a local kid had been responsible, people would want to string them up, and punish. They would want them punished. I mean, it's horrific, the losses from a wildfire. So I kind of put all that into the book, all that pressure on these teens. They live in the community, all except one. Their own high school burns down, and two of them even lose their own homes. So they are fire victims also, but they also started the fire. So it made for a lot of tension, and it just came together beautifully. And it was cathartic for me to write about a fire that I could control. And so it actually was kind of a healing process. But I did set it near Yosemite National Park, which is a couple hundred miles from my house, because I didn't want to set it in my own community, because I didn't want to re-traumatize everybody that I live with. So, but yeah, great question.
So when I was trying to figure out like what the, I guess, title of this video was going to be, the sort of title of the live stream, I ended up going with writing flawed characters, because I feel like this is something that everyone who was reading it on the Discord was saying. It's like, we want to root for these characters, but we also don't, like, they have done something bad, but they didn't mean to, but they're also like making awful decisions. So I'm really interested in like how you came to decide to write from Hannah's point of view, and then what went into deciding like how to balance making a character like likable, but also flawed. Like, how do you do that as an author?
Yeah, I love that title for this live stream, because it is, that was another sort of unexpected aspect that, of course, I started with a group of kids, had never done anything terribly wrong other than Luke. Luke gets in a little bit of trouble here and there, but he's in a very troubled home as well. So, I wasn't sure how that was going to go, but, it is a thriller. And as I was writing it, what the most interesting story to me was, once they told that initial lie, was the lies that piled on top of that, and how difficult it became to go back on that and tell the truth, and how you don't want to be the vile person in your community that nobody likes. You don't want to admit you burned down your own high school. You don't want to tell your mom that you're responsible for your own house burning down. So the pressure on them is so hot that they continue lying, and they slowly, like Hannah, talks about, they slowly start to feel like they're becoming bad people. So like they started off relatively innocent, and then it's not so much what they did, but it's how they cover it up that makes them kind of feel like they feel like they're turning into bad people. They don't like lying. I would say they don't enjoy it. And I think that's why you struggle to root for them, but you're also like, just tell the truth, it's going to be okay. But they truly are facing possible prison sentences, their college applications being rescinded. I mean, they really are facing that. And also just for a young person to face their community and continue to live there when they think everyone's going to absolutely hate them. Mm-hmm. It's just a struggle. So I put them in a terrible situation. And I thought the most interesting story was that they do keep covering it up, because if they did tell the truth right away, though the book would have been over in the beginning, it wouldn't have kept going. And so I think when I read thrillers, I do like a little bit of a grittier, like slightly darker story. It's not maybe what the hero would do. It's what like the average person might do, who has flaws and fears, and they're terrified of telling the truth. They're so scared that they just continue to do bad things. And I thought that was the more interesting story for this book. And I think in the thriller category, it works.
Definitely. Were you ever tempted to do multi-point of view? Or were you always like Hannah's point of view is going to be the one all the way throughout?
Actually, I was not tempted to do multiple point of view. It was Hannah from the beginning all the way through the end. I have done multiple point of view stories. My second thriller is dual point. Actually, there's 3 points of view, and I love what that gives to a book. But I think because I had 5 characters, I knew 5 was too many. I mean, it may not be for all readers, but for a lot of readers, it's too many. And it also would have made the book much, much longer. And so I chose Hannah because she is the sheriff's daughter. So she definitely knows the most what's at stake. And she kind of drives we need to keep this covered up, and she kind of, and she's also trying to protect their childhood friendship. And I see like this is almost an anti-coming of age story. Like, our main character does not want to grow up. And so that's part of the covering it up, is can we just keep things the way they were? So there's that desire to kind of not change and not grow and not move apart. And she kind of wants to grow up and doesn't want to grow up at the same time. So I thought that all of that made Hannah like a really interesting point of view character. And so for simplicity's sake and for the complexity of Hannah, I thought I would stay with her.
So you start, it's strange because there's a lot in this book that we'll get into with the spoiler section, that spoilers, but it isn't a spoiler to talk about Violet going missing, even though technically it happens like towards the end of the book, because you have this sort of prologue moment, flash forward, that happens right at the beginning. Was that always at the start? Did you always have this little like hint at something going on that wasn't just the wildfire, or was that something that you kind of shifted around later?
Yeah, that's good. No, that did come later. So the story began with chapter 2 initially, which is the kids like partying at the lake. And because I am a pantser, I don't plot out my books. So I didn't 100% know where this was going. I just kept turning up the heat on these characters and hotter and hotter and hotter. Yeah. And I just watched what they did, because I would say at heart, it's like a character driven story, because once I had their personalities, the way they react to the fire is going to be very different than another friend group might react. So I just kept turning up the heat and then watching them. And then the Violet part just developed naturally, actually, from the initial concept. And then I think it was around the time I probably was finished with the book. And then I went back in and added chapter 1, which is just basically a page and a paragraph, I think. And I added that back in to give that teaser that Violet is going missing. And she actually goes missing right at the halfway mark. And I think what's been fun, I've gotten feedback that people really enjoy kind of meeting these kids, knowing that one of them is going to go missing and that they're going to be searching the woods for her body at some point in the book, and you don't know when or why or how or who. So, I mean, you know who's going missing, but you don't know why or who's involved. So I think it's I really enjoyed that, putting that in there, and just, I think it kind of ramped up the tension, because this is all, because they didn't just start a fire and how we got to deal with it. This is leading to something worse.
So what you just said about the idea of, we knew that Violet was going missing, but not any of the other information. How do you decide what information to give readers at what time with a thriller? Like, saying it was Violet rather than leaving it like, oh, one of my friends has gone missing and we're searching for them, or, all of these bits of information that get dropped in at various points. Like, how do you work that out? Is that something that just comes naturally as you're writing, or do you have to like go back in and be like, oh, was that too obvious? Do I need to put another red herring in? Is this too much information?
Yeah, the beauty of the novel, and is that it is not a live performance, right? So there was such a mix of both. Like, my first draft is like a live performance. I am just winging it, and then after I decided to put in that teaser in the beginning, that's a good question. Why did I mention Violet and not just that one of them is missing? I did decide to put Violet in because I thought it could have been either way, honestly, but I did decide to put her in, and it's a process for me of writing forward and then backwards and then forward and then backwards. So I had to write the whole thing to kind of know what was going to happen. And then I went back, added the teaser, and then you read the book like multiple times and that's the point where I've got this story nailed down. I mean, even though I'm changing it and flexing it, I've got the bones laid down, or the skeleton laid down. And I love at that point, because then I can just sit there and sort of operate on it, and I can move things around and I can read it and go, okay, that bit of information, that might be too much. Or so I get to kind of do it in hindsight, and it's a lovely thing to, all the revisions. And I've come to love the revision process, because during that process, like, I would say I write my first draft for me. And I do all my editing for the reader. And that's where I'm thinking only about the reader. What's going to excite them, entice them, what's going to tease their imagination. and without going too far and giving anything away.
I think that like it definitely makes sense with the talking about it being Violet for reasons that we'll get into in the spoiler section. But in terms of like knowing you're anticipating something's going to happen to her, there are some things that happen towards that midpoint in the book where you're like, oh, this is coming, like this is coming. We're just going over the line into where this suddenly is making sense. So I wanted to also ask, I mean, when you are writing the kind of flawed characters that you are in this book, and you're ramping up the tension and it's a thriller and you've got this wildfire and then you've got this girl going missing, I imagine that there was some research that you had to do around forensics, investigations, all this kind of stuff. Was that something that you were really looking to be super accurate with, or were you more like, the story is more important, I'm going to fudge some stuff, I don't like to get into the research? Or are you like, yes, give me all of the Google terms, like let me work out the exact things in this county? Like how are you for researching?
Yeah, I normally I am, because I before this I wrote high fantasy novels where you get to make up everything, which I love. So I didn't have to do any research in the past. So I surprised myself that I do like research. I'm definitely not one who would do like historical fiction. I don't like it that much, but it's specific to the story. And I think because of what my community went through in writing about wildfire, I did want to get it right for that reason. So I definitely got into Googling a lot of different things, but I also interviewed our Sonoma County deputy chief. He just retired, but I interviewed him about arson and wildfire response, all kinds of things like that. And like, the investigative piece, like how do they determine where a fire started, like a wildfire? How do they determine where it started? What do they call that? They call it the point of origin in the area of origin. So he gave me a lot of terms, and then he told me about some press conferences I could watch to kind of get an idea. Plus, I saw so many during the 3 years that we were burned by fires, like all around our house. There were countless press conferences. There were, responses from firefighters all across the country. So some of it, I kind of knew what rabbit holes to jump down because I had been through it. One thing that's kind of funny is a lot of people call me out on the N95 mask because they're like, you can't get an N95 mask anywhere. Well, when I wrote the story, it was before the pandemic, and that's actually the recommended mask for wildfire, where smoke in the air, is an N95. So it's kind of funny, and not funny, but interesting that people thought that was the one fact they don't believe. But we definitely had to wear those. And they definitely helped, I will tell you. They kept those particles out of our breathing. It's terrible. I just wanted to say I also got to interview an investigator for the San Francisco prosecutor's office, and she helped me with the piece of Violet going missing and what's the response when an underage person goes missing. So that was really interesting as well.
Amazing. I always just really love on Twitter when I see authors talk about like, what is the latest thing for my book that I had to Google that would get me investigated? Like, if I had set a wildfire in the forest, like how much time in prison would I do? Like, suspicious. So I think we'll do another question from one of the readers. This is from Pippin, who actually I can see is in the chat right now. Hello. Were there any character backgrounds you knew you wanted from the very start, such as like Hannah's dad being a sheriff or Violet being very wealthy?
So the characters came to me, like it's almost like they told me who they were. So that was really interesting. It just sort of happened. And of course, there's a part of you that is thinking logically and you want like a variety. I definitely wanted, males and females. I wanted a mix. I had 5 characters. Originally, there were 6. We can talk about that in another section. But anyway, I ended up with 5. And but I definitely wanted, like, to me, their backstories, like, they're not like ones from the troubled home. That was important to me. Like, even though that just kind of came up with Luke, I really love how his backstory informs his character. And then with Hannah's dad being the sheriff, it just added that one I might have come up with on my own. That might not have come from, actually what happened with Hannah was I knew that Hannah really wanted to go into law enforcement herself. That was important to her character. Then I decided that her dad would be the sheriff. Like that was the writer part of me making that decision. But Hannah just told me, I want to be in law enforcement. Luke, I just knew had a terrible home life. I didn't even know what it was. I knew Drummer has one thing on his mind. And then Violet, just, being an outsider, she just comes. I just knew she was wealthy. And then Mo, she came to me as she's not really, she might seem like the mother hen because she feeds everybody and she schedules everything. But Mo is more like a dad than a mom. She's well, I don't want to make generalizations, but she's not as nurturing as you would think. Mo is very, very strong, and she's not an enabler. She's actually holds her friends accountable, but she's also feeding them all the time and setting the schedule, and she's very organized that way. So that, yeah, they just kind of popped up organically, and then I kind of helped fit them into the book.
Amazing. Before I ask the next question, just to remind everyone who is currently watching, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, because I will be looking over there at any point. Next question I'm going to take is let's have another one from Kai, who also is in the chat I've just seen. Who is your favorite character and least favorite character in the book?
I should know this. They're like my kids, so I really I like them all. I think that, yeah, I mean, when it comes to the 5, I like them all equally. I really do. And I like Hannah's dad. I don't know. I like them all. I think they just all bring something. I can't really think of a character that I don't like. I mean, maybe, and it's not that I don't like them, but if I had to choose a least favorite, maybe Justin.
We will talk about Justin later on. I know we've got some questions about him a bit later. Similar question actually from Taylor, but slightly different. Which character do you relate to the most?
That's wow. Okay, so they all have pieces of me. I think all of our characters do, for us authors. And I think honestly it's Hannah a little bit. And I'm not even sure which aspects of her, or if it's just that I think with Hannah, it is the not wanting to grow up part. I think I relate to Hannah when I was her age, kind of wanting things to stay the same and wanting your friend group stable. And we moved a lot as a kid, every almost 2 years. And so, and I don't like change too much. So I kind of relate to her on that level of just really wanting to preserve life as it is. And I think that's how I relate to her.
Kai would like to know, what inspired the toxic relationship between Hannah and Drummer? There seems to be a lot of he needs me, I'm kind of the relationship very much based kind of on this unequal footing. Have you seen similar situations in real life, or is that all from your own imagination?
So Drummer and Hannah is mostly from my imagination and from observation. What I kind of noticed with high school, with my own kids and with myself, it seems like everybody likes the same 5 people, whoever those 5 people are. There's these it people that everybody kind of seems to like. And it's high school has so many people in it, that you could date, right? But it's not true for everyone, but it always seems like there's this, even I was that way. There was only a handful of boys I was interested in. And so, and why is that when there's 400 kids, I don't know. So I sort of wanted to make Drummer that boy that or that kid that people are attracted to. But I didn't want her to have him. I kind of liked the idea that, Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how it all developed organically, but I knew I didn't want them to be a couple, but I wanted them to be super close. And I think too, I had some crushes that were not reciprocated as a kid. So it definitely plays off some of those. I didn't have anything specifically like that, but it was kind of the combination of having that unattainable person that everybody likes, and then having a crush not reciprocated, and how that can be difficult. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, partly he knows that he would ruin it if they ever did date, because he ruins all his relationships. So in a way, it's sort of an honor that he doesn't date her, but she does not see it that way.
So you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we have an actual question from Taylor about it. What made you settle on 5 friends and not another number? You said there was a 6th. What was going on there?
Yeah, so I did start with 6, and so Violet originally had a twin brother, and he's still in the book. His name is Trey, and he's barely mentioned, as he's now an older brother, and he doesn't come to Gap Mountain anymore. And the reason he came out, it was so funny, because when I was writing the book, like I told you, everyone came to me very organically and very strongly, like each character, except Trey. And I actually wrote a note on a piece of paper that said, "Don't forget about Trey," because I kept forgetting about him. And I would write like whole scenes where he was there and he didn't say a word, you know. I'm like, Trey. So I actually wrote a note, "Don't forget about Trey." And then I did a whole rewrite where I just gave him some more lines, because he was like hardly there. And the funny thing is, and I have to give lots of credit to my editor, Wendy Logia at Delacorte. She in her editorial letter, she said, "Do we need Trey?" And then she said, "I keep forgetting about him." And I'm like, oh, okay, whenever you have to write a note not to forget about a character, just get rid of them, just get them out of there. So, and she also felt like 6 was a lot to keep track of. So I had to do a whole nother rewrite where I took away all his lines, gave them back to the other characters, and got rid of Trey, other than leaving him as a big brother that no longer shows up. But what was really wonderful about that, and this was an unforeseen like benefit of getting rid of Trey, was it made Violet no longer had an ally for herself. I mean, Trey was her ally, that's her twin brother. But when he was out of the picture, she now was the only outsider to Gap Mountain. She's the only monster. That's the name of the group of friends. They're called the Monsters, and I can explain that. But she's the only one who is an outsider and doesn't live there year round. And that's a huge factor later in the book. So on several levels, that's a huge factor. So leaving her with no allies and leaving her alone, I thought built a little bit of sympathy for her, but also, up the tension for her. She just didn't have anyone in her corner.
I think that was a very good decision, actually. That makes a lot of sense, because you really get a sense in the book that she is different. There is something different about her for a number of different reasons, including like how wealthy she is and the fact she's not living there full time. And I think, having the twin brother who occasionally speaks turn up, maybe would have changed that. That's so interesting. We'll talk a little bit more in the spoiler section about sort of possible other endings and all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that section, I have a couple of questions that we always ask that are about kind of like inspiration-based stuff, because it's always fun to hear the different answers from different authors. Are you the kind of writer who likes to read at the same time as you write, like get really immersed in the genre and things like that? Or are you like, nope, I do not want to be influenced by any other writer, I'm on my own, I'm just concentrating on writing?
Yeah, so I do read while I'm writing, but not in the genre that I'm writing. So yes, I continued reading books, and I read a ton of thrillers. So I was probably reading adult thrillers mostly as I was writing. Yeah.
Amazing. Do you have, speaking of like enjoying thrillers, do you have authors that inspire you, or that maybe you'd recommend if someone's interested in writing this kind of like flawed protagonist thriller type book themselves, that you would recommend reading?
Yeah, one book that I really enjoyed actually right before writing this book was The Talented Mr. Ripley. That's Patricia Highsmith. That's a great book if you want like a flawed, interesting character. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of YA thrillers, but I think interestingly, something like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, she's a very likable character. So that's it, you know, it's dark, but in a different way because the character's so likable. But I think I find some of the, well, in One of Us Is Lying, the characters are, you're not sure, but in case you haven't read it, but they are pretty likable. So I think I seem to find more of the unlikable characters in the adult novels. So yeah, and I like a lot of Gillian Flynn books and Megan Abbott books for that reason. I like those twisty like characters. You're just not sure if you can trust them.
Amazing. Those are great recommendations. I think what we're going to do now is go on to spoiler section territory, because I know I've got at least 5 questions from people here, and I want to make sure we have time to ask all of them. So at this point, if you are still watching and you haven't finished the book yet, pause this video, finish your book, and come back to this later. So let's have a look. Okay, we're going to go straight in with obviously the most important question for this section. We've had this question from multiple people, including Taylor and Pippin. Why did you kill Matilda? That's a big question that all of us want to know. That's the question.
Wow, I was not expecting that. So it's okay. I love Matilda. Matilda's very special because she shows a lot about Hannah, actually. Hannah, in the beginning, when Matilda's about to die in the fire on the road, Hannah will not leave her dog. And so I wanted to show that side of Hannah. Violet was ready to leave Matilda in the dust and let her burn up. But Hannah, absolutely no way. And so to me, Matilda's like the biggest hero in the entire book.
Yep, agreed.
She's going deaf. She's very old, but the most, I'm going to cry. I think the most like heroic death for Matilda, because she was on her last legs, was to go out protecting her owner. And so like, I actually feel like I gave her the death she would have chosen for herself. Protecting her owner to the end, that was her life. And yeah, so I love Matilda, don't get me wrong. But that's the death that, you know, I think she would have chosen. But also on the flip side of that, it was one of the prices Hannah paid for lying. And so some people think, oh, this is it's hard to give spoilers. I'm not used to it. But, you know, Hannah, you know, people say, well, why did she got away with it? Well, not 100%. I mean, she's all alone at college, struggling to make friends, and her dog, it's her fault her dog died. So, and one of her best friends. So she's also part of like, that's part of the price Hannah had to pay. And it's not fair to Matilda, but again, the dog went out doing what she loves, what she was born to do. And it's better than going to the vet and getting the shot. So she went out fighting. Yeah.
I was convinced. We had such like, people were commenting on the Discord, like theories as we were going along. I was convinced in my head. I was like, oh yeah, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. That Violet was killed by the bear. I was in my head, I was like, okay, it's going to be like a double buff thing. It's going to be a whole thing where like she begins to think that maybe she had something to do with it, like that the boys had something to do with it. Violet's dead, but actually exactly what happened, but instead of going to the bridge, they went to the bridge just to chat, and then they went back to the house, and the bear, smelling the blood, took Violet, and that was what she was going to have to remember. I was convinced that was going to happen. And so I put it in the chat and then kept reading, and about half an hour later, I was like, oh, I was wrong. That wasn't it. So I'm really interested, like what alternate, like, did you ever have alternate endings or things that you were toying around with that were different that were going to happen? Or from the beginning, like as soon as you started to think about the fact you knew Violet was going missing, like, this is what's going to happen at the end?
There were, so I had like 8 alternative endings, but
Damn.
I know, but they weren't that different. Most of them were variations of what ended up happening, but it was always Hannah. And actually there was one ending where it was Luke, which I quickly got rid of that one. But so other than that, that was probably the biggest variation, was having it be Luke. It was mostly variations of Hannah and Violet, and there was one where she actually killed her in the attic and then took her body to the lake. There were a couple different variations. The first one was super brutal. The very first ending, this was how clear I was that it was going to be Hannah, is she actually killed her. She hit her with the unicorn. She actually took the glass unicorn and smacked her in the head with it, and kind of more than just knocked her out, really disabled Violet. And then when Luke snuck in, she pulled her into the landing, and then she proceeded to suffocate Violet, trying to keep her quiet. Oh. She didn't want Luke, she didn't want Luke to catch them. And then she thought Violet was dead. She took her to the lake. She dropped her into the lake. And then right as she's about to leave, Violet pops up, still alive.
Oh God.
And she's like, okay, I've hit her in the head. I've suffocated her. I've driven her to another location. She pushes her down and kills her because she can't let her live now. That's how brutal the first ending was. And it was actually my agent was like, no, let's tone this down a bit. She goes, I just feel icky. And I realized too, it took all the subtlety out of the book. What subtlety there is, it kind of removed, and it was too brutal, and it was a little too much. It was a little too dark. But she did end up actually, in the original ending, she got, it was all caught on a wildlife camera. And and the FBI showed her the video, and that's how she remembered. And she just went, I did it. She confessed, and she got life in prison. So
that's so interesting, because it's this thing where it is Hannah, but it's not like malicious, but it still is Hannah. Like it's that kind of like always walking that fine line that I guess is that kind of nice characters but doing bad things, and then slowly getting sucked more and more into like how bad will I go, like what will I be capable of in order to like protect this secret and protect myself in some ways, especially when you've got this character who like through most of the book is like the one person who isn't suspected, or like that they can't really pin anything on, even though she is arguably the reason why it happened, or at least, you know, a big part of why it happened in the first place. Did you have a lot of fun like writing the tension between the characters? Like was there ever any point at which they became more sort of at odds, at like loggerheads with each other around that? Because there was like a little bit of tension, but I feel like that you could easily have had a character who was like, screw you, like this is all your fault, like I hate you, like come after Hannah or like one of the others for it. Or was it always like just bubbling below the surface kind of tension?
It was always bubbling because of the because they met when they were 7 in that play where the wild things are, which is why they're called the monsters. They met when they were 7, and so they do have love and respect for each other that runs very, very deep, and they're all traumatized by the end of this friendship. So they didn't they tried not to cross the line into where I hate you or it's all your fault. Like it was clearly really Luke and Hannah's fault that the fire got started. And they really avoided being like, except one time Violet said, like, if we go to prison, like, is it really our fault too? Or is it just you guys, you know? And so she played with that line a little bit of like pointing fingers, but I wanted the monsters to not go there, and to try to respect the friendship. And they really tried. It was really Mo at the end who was like, when she finally came clean herself, she's like, I feel better. And she was, you know, basically like she lost respect for Hannah. And so, you know, but I wanted to, even then though, she doesn't, you know, get in her face and say like those things you can never take back. They do really love each other. And the tension between Hannah and Violet really, like, she even says at the end, it's not, I could forgive you for wanting to tell. I could forgive you for loving the same boy. But what's really, she can't forgive her for saying, I'm done with Gap Mountain and I'm done with you. When she said, I'm done with Gap Mountain, which was the same thing as saying, I'm done with you. And when she said that, Violet crossed the line. she basically severed her relationship with Hannah and the monsters when she said that. I'm done with Gap Mountain. And that's where all the tension came from for Hannah. It wasn't because of Drummer. It wasn't because of telling. It was when she said that she kind of lost her mind a little bit. And yeah, the killing was accident, but it was like, even she was like, did I wait too long on purpose? You know, there's that little, again, the bubbling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We have a question from Taylor. Did Drummer figure out what Hannah did in the end? I got that impression, but I wasn't sure.
So Drummer never did know. Drummer suspects. He definitely suspects. He's kind of like, he was sort of prodding her a little bit to see if she would confess to him. That's what I was playing with there, is he's like, but then he doesn't want to know that at the same time. So he pushes a little bit and then he pulls right back, and he's just like, he's going to move on. That's Drummer anyway. He's going to work on himself and get his life ironed out. And he and Luke joined the firefighter squad, the inmate firefighter squad. And that's kind of their repentance for the fires and stuff. But they don't want to, the monsters never wanted to really cross the line, and they don't want to believe that Hannah did it.
It's kind of interesting, right? At the end, you kind of have these characters who are going through what all of their worst fear was in terms of like being caught and facing up to that, like acknowledging that, but they seem like they're potentially in a better place psychologically for that. And then you have the character who like got away with it, but ultimately, like you said, is sort of going to be carrying that around forever. What was it like, that decision? Like, did you kind of, how did you come to the conclusion that you needed these two kind of different sides of it? Like, was there ever any situation where all of them, well, I guess, yeah, you said there was one where Hannah kind of got caught, as it were. Was there ever one where like all of them got off? Like, how did you balance kind of the endings for the characters?
Yeah, it was, the other ones did all kind of grow up and come clean and face what they did. And Hannah never did in any of the drafts, even when she got caught. Well, she did in that one, I guess, because she just confessed. She said, yep, that she couldn't believe she did all of that. And because she hadn't remembered it, that she had done all that to Violet. It was all in the heat of the moment. And so she was regretful in every version. She was always regretful, super regretful. And I do call it like an anti-coming of age story, because I really wanted to show the other four, even if they didn't do the right thing initially, they're trying to make up for it. You know, Mo's become like a public speaker. The boys are fighting fires. Violet's gone. But Hannah, she cannot face it. And she's lost everything. So she lost all her friends. She's alone. If you look at it, Hannah hasn't made a friend since she was 7. She has her barrel racing friends, but they don't actually hang out. Hannah's got some awkwardness like that she struggles with, and she struggles to connect. We can talk about Justin too. She struggles to connect with people. She tries and she just fails, and she doesn't really know what's wrong with her. So now she's looking at a future of very few friends, if any, the weight of what she did. So she kind of lost everything in the end.
Yeah, I mean, so that was actually another question that we can kind of talk about with Justin is, Kai has asked, what made you write about Hannah's first time?
I think because I do love coming of age stories, and even if it's an anti-coming of age story, that is my favorite. Even my favorite thing to write is about characters growing up or not growing up, or fighting growing up. And I think that's partly how it worked was he was another character who just kind of showed up, and then he showed up again. And so I kind of played with that character and let him be in the book. And then I wanted to show the lengths that she'll go to try to connect with another human being, and her failing at that. And it was also an attempt to connect with Drummer by making him jealous. But it was also an attempt to connect with Justin, where she naively thought maybe he's going to be my boyfriend, just because he asked her out for a first date. And also it kind of showed her impulsiveness, her impulsive side, and her awkwardness and her confusion about things, just misreading misreading things, and maybe to also build a little sympathy for her. I mean, she she tried, and that didn't work out either. It's not what she really wanted. And I just wanted to show her floundering and struggling to just to find her place in the world. And she was really trying to be Violet. She was trying to dress really cute, because even when they're on the horseback ride, it comes out, Hannah doesn't really do her makeup and hair. She's not very good at it. But that night she put on a cute outfit. She feels like she's too tall and all these things. And she wants to be small and cute, like Violet. But she tried to be Violet, and it failed for her, because she's not Violet. And really, at the end of the day, Hannah needs to embrace herself. And if she could have let go, grown up, faced what she did, accept who she is as a person, and connect with people in a more organic and genuine way, she would be fine. So I would say this is a cautionary tale in a sense.
I'm wondering, and I kind of put this in the spoiler section in case your answer was a spoiler. Were there sections that were more challenging for you to write or to get right, or was it all pretty smooth sailing, or pretty much the same?
I think it really flowed, this story. It was just the ending, rewriting it so many times, trying to get the right tone between this accidental killing and why. Because at first it was because she was jealous about Drummer. And I thought, no, I don't want this to be about a boy at the end of the day. I want this to be about friendship. So I also had to rewrite it to get that piece kind of figured out, and realizing that Hannah's all about loyalty. And it was when, Violet said, "I'm done with you," that she mentally disconnected from Violet. And that's why she's able to not tell. It was probably just the ending that really was a struggle for me.
Finally, of the spoiler section, I think, and then I think we've got a few more minutes, because we've got some questions more about the writing process as well. I just wanted to make sure we got all of these done. We've talked about the twin brother, and we've talked about that endings being changed. Were there any other parts of the story that got cut from the final book that either didn't work, you had to replace, or you just didn't have the space to include?
No, there weren't any other scenes or characters that got cut out, just other than through the natural process of when I would change the end, there would be a waterfall effect through the book. When I took Trey out, there was a waterfall effect through the book. Initially, it was Trey who went off the cliff and got a TBI, and then it became Luke. And I think it was so much better that it was Luke. That whole scene, everything came together once Trey was gone. But nothing huge, no.
Okay, well, now you've said that, now I'm like, wait, I have more questions. Did Luke drive off the cliff on purpose, to your mind, or does even he not know?
He doesn't know. Yeah, he was in a state. He was very upset. Feeling hopeless, and he took off driving too fast. And so, we'll never know. But I think he'll never know exactly why he did that.
That was the most intense end of a chapter moment, where I was just like, yeah, he just drove off a cliff, and I'm like, what is happening? There was just it was so, I did I think twice as I was reading, I was like, let me just go back to this first chapter, because I knew you've got the times and the dates and the information at the start of each of the chapters. So I was like, how long is it until this is going to happen? Because the thing I was talking about before with cluing into Violet, as soon as we started to go down the path of Violet seems like she's wavering, she seems like she wants to say something, as soon as she sent the message being like, I'm going to tell everyone, even the scene become obvious that that's what she wants, I was like, oh, she's going missing, this girl's going missing. And that's what's so interesting is at that point that this isn't there's some, maybe Justin might come in as something it's no, it's going to be one of the monsters. It's that just is the thing that makes sense, or they're going to be involved in some way, the reason why it's Violet and gone. Because up until then, there was still the possibility of maybe there's some other reason she's going missing, or maybe she's decided to leave or run away or whatever, or something's going on. But as soon as that text got sent, it was like, okay, we're like powering towards this finale then, I guess, like this is happening, which was so, it was really good, because I definitely think that there's, in some stories you have like a prologue or a thing that flashes forward, and it doesn't necessarily make for a better reading experience the whole way through the book. It's just like a cool thing to start with that like gets the reader excited. But I really felt like in this book it made sense for both reasons. Like there was, it like got you really excited, you were like building up to it, the tension really kind of built, rather than like being destroyed by the fact you're like, okay, well I know she's going missing at some point, so I guess I'll wait for that to happen, which was really fun as a reader.
Well, that's great to hear it from your perspective. It's so cool to hear it. I love this spoilery section because yeah, I don't get to know what it's like to read it for the first time. So that's really cool to hear. How
has it been like since it's come out in terms of the like reception from readers? Have you got to do different like events and Q&As and stuff, or not so much because of all the pandemic and everything?
Well, yeah, it's been mostly virtual events. So there's been virtual events. I've traveled to bookstores and done signings. And there was a great blog tour through Right Reads. I believe it was Right Reads. There was a great blog tour where I got, I think there were like 100 reviews of the book through that. And what's been really exciting for me is just the people but the worst thing that happens next. So I just keep kind of piling on the worst things, but I kind of follow the plotting of like a movie, like a 2-hour movie in my head. I don't plot it out, but in my head, it's like a movie to me. And so I'm glad it works that way for the reader, because that's pretty exciting. And if it were to come out on movie or TV, that would be super exciting.
Amazing. I think we've just got a couple more questions. I don't think we've had anything anymore on the chat. So we often on the kind of on these live streams get people who are interested in writing themselves. Do you have any advice that you would want to give to people, either like a good piece of advice that you've been given, or like something that you wish you knew before when you were first starting writing?
Yeah, I would say, because I actually wrote 4 books before I published my first book. So I had like 4 practice novels. I don't know, if I had known everything that I know now, I probably would never have gotten into this. No, it's a lot. I mean, I had to write 4 books before I got one published. And if I had known that, I might have been daunted by that. And it's not true for everybody. So don't think you have to write a bunch of practice novels. But if you don't sell your first book, don't worry about it. Like, just keep going. And I think some great advice is like, when you finish a project, start a new project for 2 reasons. One, you may not sell the first project, but the second reason is if you do sell your first project or any one of your projects, nobody wants you to just write one book. Your agent, your publisher, your readers, they're going to want you to keep going. And I think so many of us, when we're aspiring authors, is we just want to publish one book. You know, that's how I started. I was like, I just want to publish a book and have it in the bookstore. And that was my dream. But fortunately, I did write a bunch of novels to get started, and then I just kept writing them, and it worked out, because then, you know, your readers want more, your agent and publisher want more. So I just encourage people to look like it's a marathon and look down the road and think about like the body of work that you want to have, and just keep writing in your favorite genre and age group, because a book will take off, if not the first one. And you're going to need more anyway. And it might not be one you've already written, but through all that practice, you're just going to get better. And then people are going to want you to keep going. So you need that muscle strong, that writing muscle. So the best advice is practice, 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 and read, read, read. And that's, you know, there's really nothing better than that. And the other reason to write all these books, so I guess there's 3, is it'll develop your voice. So the more you write, the stronger your voice will get. And it's something that can't be taught. It's something that no one can describe, but it's about confidence, really. And the more you write and the more confident you get, and sometimes people start off kind of imitating their favorite writer, that will go away. And as you keep going, your voice will come out. And that's when you're going to start to, readers will follow you like the Pied Piper, because if they like your voice, they're going to like your voice in every book.
Oh my God, what an amazing answer to finish on. That was brilliant. Some like amazing advice there. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. This was so fun. I'm so happy that we got to chat and that you got to answer all of these questions from everyone. And we managed to ask all of the questions. So that's brilliant. 10 out of 10. For everyone who is watching at home, the next month's book is The Passing Playbook, which is about a trans teen who has to decide between staying stealth, staying closeted, having kind of sporting success, or outing himself as trans in order to essentially fight off some transphobic policies that have come in at his school. So it's a romance, it's a YA contemporary romance, so very different to the books we've just read, but it should be something nice and lovely, bubbly, and light for the kind of darkening days of November. And then in December, we are reading Skin of the Sea, which is being known as the Black Mermaid's book, which is also very exciting. Those are the two that have been announced, and we're going to have having some meetings, having some thoughts about the next year and what's coming up later. But yeah, if you want to be kept up to date with all of this stuff, then check out the Discord in the description, and we will see you next time. See you later, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.